welcome everybody. Let's talk real estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current commercial real estate market here in Southern California. As we take a no BS look at both sides of the issues driving this market today to find the best solutions going forward. With our man right in the middle, it's Barry Saywitz. Hey, Barry.
Hey, good morning, Paul, and good morning to all of our viewers and our listeners out there. Happy Tuesday. We're back again. I am Barry Saywitz, president of the Saywitz Company, managing partner of Saywitz Properties, and host of Let's Talk Real Estate. And so we're here again to talk all things real estate, and I'm excited about today's show because we're going to talk about something that affects everybody and impacts everybody in one way or another, and at the end of the day flows back to the real estate, and that's the airport. And so I'm excited to welcome our guest, Charlene Reynolds, who's the director of the John Wayne Airport and oversees many of its operations and budgets and all things associated with the airport. Charlene, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Barry. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I appreciate you coming on. While the airport is not necessarily real estate, to me it is because it impacts everything around it. And it impacts the lifeblood of Orange County and people coming and going and business. And there's been many changes to the airport over the years, both good and bad, and pushback from the residents around it and government authorities. And so for those folks out there who aren't familiar with the John Wayne Airport and its operations, I guess maybe you could give us a brief explanation in terms of your board of directors and how the operations work in relation to the county and its own sort of autonomous business, if you will.
Oh, great question. And so John Wayne Airport sits on 511 acres, bounded by Costa Mesa, Irvine. The airport is actually owned by the county of Orange. However, we are considered a self-sustaining business enterprise, which means that we receive no funding from the county, nor are we allowed to use any of the funds generated by the airport to support the county, and that's per FAA rules. And so we really make our money by leasing airport land to our tenants, our parking operations, the operations from the airlines, and our food, beverage, and retail programs within the airport.
It really is it's a multifaceted business, right? I mean, you really have multiple different areas of revenue generation.
Oh, absolutely. And so really my background in business really helps me in understanding how to generate additional revenue in order to invest in the airport for the future.
And so not only is it a business, I mean, so it's not, contrary to what people think, it's not really a government-run entity. It is private business in the sense that you're for-profit. And at the same time, you're trying to provide the customer or the consumer with a positive experience in coming to the airport and doing what they need to do. But at the same time, your goal is got to make money, and whether that's restaurants or parking or shops or any of the above. You've got all these different revenue streams to try and manage at the end of the day.
Oh, absolutely, because we're really focused on what we call the guest experience. When our passengers and guests come into the airport, it is just not a function of getting on a plane or getting off the plane. They become real destinations. And what our passengers want are additional amenities if they have to sit there for a couple hours waiting on their next flight. So what's the experience within the airport? And that's why we have programs such as our music program. We have the therapy dogs. We're investing in upgrading our food, beverage, and retail offerings because we have to provide those amenities that our passengers are looking for. And from a business aspect, are we carrying the goods in the restaurants that they actually want to go and purchase and or basically have a meal. So we're always constantly thinking about our offerings within the terminal and making them something that the traveling public really desires.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And you have other folks around you that are dealing with these various different aspects of whether it's the customer experience or the revenue generation, or certainly in dealing with the FAA and the business operations of the flights themselves. What kind of staff do you guys maintain as part of running the airport?
And so, which would be surprising to many, from an airport administration, we have about 200 employees that actually run the business of the airport, but we have about 5,000 badged employees that help make the airport work every single day, and that includes employees from the airlines, Uber, Lyft, taxis, the concessionaires, the parking managers, the FBO employees, the flight schools, all of which I work with and on various issues pertaining to the airport.
Not to mention the folks from TSA and Homeland Security.
That is correct.
And so the airport itself, for those again who are not familiar, I mean, it really started out as a small airport, and then had some commuter flights, a lot of private, smaller planes back in the day, and then has now grown to 3 full functioning terminals. And international flights, and really has grown in almost capacity from the standpoint of maximizing and utilizing the land that you have available to you. I guess talk about where you are today in terms of the growth for the airport, and then what the expectations are for moving forward.
And so right now we serve about 11.2 million passengers per year. Some of your listeners may be familiar with the settlement agreement that really dictates how the airport operates. That settlement agreement was signed in 1985. And so we are capped as an airport of how many passengers we're allowed to serve every single year. And so we have to work within that. We are bounded by 2 freeways. And so as an airport director, I'm looking at how do we maximize the usage of the airport and what's the future of the airport when the current settlement agreement expires in 2030.
Which is not that far away. I mean,
I'm sorry, Barry.
I said it. I said 2030 is not that far away. It's going to sneak up on us.
It is not that far away, and what we will begin is negotiations with the parties of the settlement agreement from the city of Newport. There's 2 community groups that are involved also. So probably the latter part of 2026, we'll begin discussions about that, and really decide what the future of the airport is, really regarding that map cap and the maximum number of passengers we can serve every single year.
And there's also restrictions in that settlement agreement in terms of how early you can take off in the morning and how late you can land, and some pretty stiff penalties for the airlines if they violate those hours of operations, just because of all the residential around the airport.
That is correct. And so first flight out is 7 a.m. And I laugh because when I fly out, sometimes my ticket will say we're flying out at 6:45. That's not true. You're not flying out until 7 a.m. because there are penalties. We want to be a good neighbor to the city of Newport, who's on the departure path. So really working with the airlines on that. And again, the message and working with Newport is being a good neighbor and reducing noise. So I often meet with the airlines about bringing in the newer generation of aircraft, which are much, much quieter. And we've gone from my time here at John Wayne from 16% in new aircraft to 37%. So I continue to have those discussions and we're just waiting for certification on maxes from the FAA, and then also from the Boeing backlog to get some of those newer um, aircraft in here to be even quieter than what we are today.
And do you guys, as the airport authority and running the airport, I mean, it is really connected to the tourism industry, and whether it's Disneyland or Knott's or the beach or all the reasons that people come to Orange County, is there a marketing aspect to what you're doing where you integrate with some of the other either private companies or some of the other entities throughout the county to help promote tourism and make, again, that consumer experience that much better and bring people to the places that they're coming to see without issue?
Oh, and absolutely. So I am on the board of Visit Newport, also on the board of the Orange County Sports Commission. We are members of numerous chambers because we work collectively as a, a partner in the community and for tourism, because the airports themselves are, in many states, the largest economic engine in a state. And so we have to have a true partnership. We are the gateway for the community. And so I truly believe in having that partnership, um, so we understand what their goals are as far as tourism and conferences, and having discussions with the airlines relative to routes and destinations into Orange County.
And how has it been? I mean, if we rewind back a little bit, I know you've only been with the airport a few years, but you came in sort of in the middle of COVID, which had to be a struggle for many reasons. Not only just travel was down, but just the logistics of trying to run a ship, if you will, with all of the constraints that COVID brought along with it. So has the travel recovered from, its sort of lulls in partial shutdown during COVID? And where do we stand today? And where do you see it for the balance of 2025?
And so we have recovered from COVID. As an airport, some of our other peers have not fully recovered, even though I think a couple days ago was the fifth anniversary of the start of COVID, which is amazing. Um, However, what we continue to do is look at the numbers, working with the airlines on the destinations, and we want to have those nonstop routes that our flying public want to have at John Wayne, because we really don't want them going to Ontario and or LA. So we want to be the first choice for the residents in Orange County.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because that kind of leads me to my next question, because I live not far from the airport, and so my first choice always is John Wayne in terms of a departure and a return. But there are instances where the pricing for the ticket is substantially more out of John Wayne than it would be out of a Long Beach or an LAX. I guess just talk about why that is the case. Is that back to certain routes that airlines have control over where they monopolize it and then they charge it? Or is it really just a cost of doing business coming out of John Wayne versus someplace else?
So for me, I would just say it is economics one-on-one, supply and demand.
Yeah.
And so when you have, because of the settlement agreement, you restrict the supply, and your demand outweighs your supply, then it allows the airlines to charge a premium to fly out of the airport. And so in future years, as we, negotiate with the city of Newport and those two community groups, as we increase our supply here in Orange County, then it will have the effect of basically lowering those ticket prices.
And I think it cuts both ways. I'm curious your thoughts, but if the ticket prices come down, it will drive more traffic to Orange County, which in theory would be better for the overall economy here, and it brings more people in. The flip side of that is folks who are already living here would say, hey, I don't need any more people coming here. Let them stay away and let them fly to LA.
That is true, but that's a business that I manage every single day. And so it's always a balancing act. One, being a good neighbor, and then two, promoting commerce and business within Orange County. And so, how do we strike that balance? Is it an increase to 13 million passengers per day or 15 million passengers per day? That will be part of the conversation for the future of the airport.
And this negotiation that you're talking about that's coming up, will that likely then be the footprint for some extended period of time? I mean, the original settlement agreement was, if it's 1985 to 2030, I mean, was 45 years. Will this next round of negotiations be for some extended 20, 30, 40-year period of time? Or do you feel like it'll need to be reevaluated more frequently just because of the dynamics of what's going on?
And so right now we're in the fourth iteration of that original settlement agreement. So it's been extended several times
I
in
see.
15-year blocks. And so really it will be a policy decision of the Board of Supervisors if it is another 15 years, and or if it's 10 years, or if it's something different. Um, Aviation is dramatically changing. There's this thing out there called eVTOL, which is the flying uh, taxis, as they call them. There's a lot of innovation. And so when you lock yourself into a 15-year agreement, does it really allow you flexibility for the future? Um, and so that'll be a decision that the Board of Supervisors will have to make.
Yeah. No question. And then I guess I also wanted to ask you about the development around the airport, because the Orange County is already fairly fully developed. It wasn't that way in 1985, but now what you have is what I'm just going to call redevelopment of some of this original product base and product type in the areas around the airport, particularly in the IBC on the eastern side of the airport, where you have older industrial and manufacturing and quasi-office buildings that are getting torn down. And the highest and best use, for the most part, has really been housing. And then combine that with a push from Sacramento to want to push these cities to build more housing. There's been articles and news out there that there are multiple projects on larger scale that are going to be developed in that area. And then how does that impact the airport or vice versa?
Yeah, and so it's really tough for the airport because the majority of these projects we have deemed to be incompatible with the airport and from a noise perspective. So the closer you build to the airport, we anticipate, even though there may be dual pane windows, that once we have people inhabiting those new housing elements, that they're going to start complaining about the airport. The airport just celebrated 100 years of its airfield, and so the airport has been here for quite some time. And what happens is once the airport deems something incompatible, the cities can override the airport as they have done numerous times. And unfortunately, the airport then becomes the bad guy to the
Yeah.
residents, although we have warned
Right.
the cities that about the usage.
And it's just dueling factions because you got the governor in Sacramento pushing, saying build housing. You've got the city saying, hey, there's tax revenue and we need housing in our city. And then you've got these people that move in and then they start complaining day one, and then there's not much anybody can do after the fact.
Right. Yeah, and so it's very, very challenging, and I spend a lot of my time going to various communities and HOAs talking about the airport and really trying to get residents to understand that we have to coexist together.
Yeah, and you combine that with an aging community in Newport Beach, where you have folks that have been there for a while that probably complain that, hey, every year it gets worse and worse because you got more flights and more people and more things going on. And I'm guessing it's to some. I mean, you have to fight the fight, but to some degree, there's no pleasing everybody.
That is correct. And so that's the job of an airport director.
Yeah, that sounds like
And
fun stuff. Some town halls and some hand holding and some apologizing politely, and then duck and run to some degree, right?
absolutely.
So I guess, and you have a history with the airport in Houston. You've been in, I guess I'll call it the aviation world for quite some time. Do you look to other cities around the country as either a model to compare things that you're doing here at John Wayne, or is it the opposite, or is John Wayne Airport really have some unique characteristics that most other airports just don't have? I mean, we have the steep takeoff, which is like a ride at Disneyland by itself sometimes, that most other places don't have. But I'm just curious if there's cross sharing of ideas and policies that have worked in other places that you pick up from.
Oh, absolutely. So, my career being in Phoenix and in Houston, both serving over 40 million passengers a year, I have brought some of the best practices from those what we call large hub airports to John Wayne to make it work more efficiently. But I'm also very, very involved in some airport associations. I sit on a couple of the boards. And so learning from other airports, what they're doing, what can we bring to Orange County and make it our own. Started an aviation academy, which is a 7-week program where the community can come and learn all about the airport, from how we're financed to our food and beverage programs to our IT innovations. And that was something that I borrowed from another airport, but put a unique Orange County twist on the program. And so we all share information. Um, there's 500 commercial airports in the United States, and a lot of the airport directors were very close and we stayed connected because we have a unified system that we all share.
Gotcha. And I got to assume there's some sort of networking among the airports in Southern California, because a lot of the businesses and the I guess I'll call it problems, issues, whatever come up, apply in to some degree to other similar airports like a Long Beach or like a Burbank, that are facing their own issues with growth and capacity, and as the communities around them grow, so does the airport.
Yeah, absolutely. So I serve as the vice president for the California Airport Council, and it's a collection of all the airports. And we have, shared agendas relative to legislation that may impact the airport and the airports in a good and or bad way. And so we meet every quarter to discuss what we're seeing relative to passenger traffic, new legislation, and just sharing ideas. So, as an airport director, as a body, we're pretty close and share information um, as much as we possibly can.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. We talked about it a little bit before we got on the air, but I want to ask the question on the air. There has been talk over an extended period of time of utilizing the land from the El Toro base in South Orange County and turning that either into a second airport or making that the primary airport. Is that now dead? And John Wayne really is the airport for Orange County, and that's what we're going with for moving forward?
Yeah, so relative to El Toro, that property for a future airport is no longer viable. The runways were torn out several years ago. There's been significant growth um, for housing in that area, so that's no longer viable. Orange County's John Wayne Airport is it for the county, and so as the airport director, what I have to look for the future is how do we utilize the small footprint that we have more efficiently, and so we're really working on that for the future. Is there a possibility to add an additional gate for more service? How do we maximize the usage of the gates that we have to add new service in the future? So really working with staff. um, I try to think of 3 and 5 year increments, and so I'm working with staff really on what the airport looks like in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, makes sense. And how does that impact? I know there's a lot of private jets on the campus side of the airport, and then you have the whole sort of mini terminal there for private flights and the sort of, I'll call it, I don't know what the correct term is, but the shared flights where you're buying not on a commercial flight. And then you have also just the smaller planes. It seems like there's pressure that moves those folks out of there and makes it difficult to be able to accommodate them going forward with the increase of all of the regular commercial flights that are in and out of the airport. Is that true? And how do those folks continue to be part of the overall program moving forward?
And so right now, commercial activity represents only 33% of the airport. Those private flights represent 67%
Hmm.
and smaller GA. However, it is an airport with many different users who all have different demands. And sometimes the individual users want the airport for their exclusive use. And so part of my job, it's a balancing act. And how do I uh, provide for these varying usage for all of the users of John Wayne? And so sometimes it's having conversations with the GA pilots who feel like they're being pushed out by jets, and working with the fixed base operators and also the airlines, just trying to make it home for every single user at the airport. But it's becoming increasingly um, difficult as we have newer technology, more jets come in, and the demand for more general aviation operations at the airport.
Yeah. And those hangars that are along the sides of the airport, are those also owned by the airport and people are paying rent? And so you're technically a landlord, or are those private hangars that are owned by other individuals?
So at one point in time, some of them were owned by the airport. They are currently being redeveloped by the fixed base operators. And so what we receive is rent for the land
I see.
that they're building on. So yes, they're long-term tenant. Um, Several years ago, 30-year leases were signed with those companies, and so they will certainly be here at the airport, but they're making major investments of hundreds of millions of dollars in the next 3 to 7 years to um, improve the fixed base operations here at the airport.
And I'm guessing that that means rent goes up for those guys who own planes, but if you can afford the plane, you'll have to pay for the place to keep it, and that's just how it goes.
Yeah, so they have certainly seen rent increases, and there again, the thought was it was the county imposing those increases. Um, that was not the case. We just rent lease the land to those private companies.
Got it. And then lastly, I want to ask you about safety, because I think that's always something that everybody's concerned about. And I know that as the airport itself, it's not, I mean, part of it is that you're supposed to provide a safe and pleasant experience, but the safety aspect of it is really left to Homeland Security and the TSA. But I got to assume that you're right in the middle of it as well. What steps collectively is everybody taking to ensure John Wayne has been a safe airport and no real incidents. And what are you doing to ensure that that's the case going forward?
And so there are several things happening from a TSA perspective. I am deemed or termed what they call the responsible executive. So anything relative to security that happens that goes right or wrong, I am responsible according to TSA. And there are some personal, even personal penalties that I could find myself being subjected to. But on a monthly basis, I meet with the regional federal security director who oversees operations in California. We have a really good relationship. We talk about some of those security threats relative to airports across the network and making sure that we're both on the same page as far as security. Working with my staff, we've really built up our security team internally. We're working on enhancing our cyber security efforts. So not only do we have sometimes the people threat, we're seeing increasingly more and more the technology threat. And then also, I am going to DC next week where I will be meeting with some of our congressional delegation and championing a new tower because the tower that we have currently at the airport is aging. It was built in the 80s, and I think it's time for us to have a new tower at the airport. So I will be going and speaking to our congressional delegation about putting that tower on a higher replacement list than what it is currently today.
It's
And
exciting.
so, yeah, I'm
And
very excited.
yeah, that'll be a good one. And then the other thing I was going to ask you is with the new Trump administration and with their new stance on, the border and homeland security, has any of that trickled back down to your world as far as what you're dealing with? And are they increasing or pushing to increase security from the top down at Homeland Security, or it's not much different than where it was before?
So the challenge that we're working on as collectively as airports, what we're seeing is some of our assigned custom and border patrol staff that are currently assigned to airports being moved to the border. And we have concerns about the level of staffing if it's being taken out of the airport and moved to the border because it can actually have a negative impact if we have left staff available to ensure the safety of the airport.
Yeah.
There has to be a balance and or more officers that are hired for specifically just the borders and not taking them out of airports.
And I guess we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, once they get a lockdown on the border and have it sustained, then maybe they can shift some of those resources back to the other areas that we're talking about. I guess that's a concern for everybody, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. The other thing I was going to ask you, Paul's waving at me that we're out of time. He's hungry. He wants to go get something to eat. But if people want to find out more information about the airport and the happenings that are going on there, what would be the website that they would go to?
And so our official website is ocair.com. And so you can find every single thing that you want to find about the airport, the list of restaurants that we currently have. We also have special events happening in the airport from time to time. You can get your OC Air Pass. You don't have to have a ticket, and you can come and explore the airport. You can come out and you can watch flights take off. And so take a look at our website, and it is truly an exciting place to be in. We welcome everyone to John Wayne.
Sounds good. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your thoughts and your insights with us. And for everybody out there, certainly appreciate all that you and your staff and the other folks there do to make John Wayne Airport a safe and exciting place and help the community grow. And I wish you well in all the challenges that you have going forward. It sounds like there's many and it changes every day. So I wish you well with all of that.
Well, thank you, Barry. It's been my pleasure.
Well, good. So for everybody else out there, I am still Barry Saywitz. I will still be back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate. Special thanks to everybody here at the station for making it happen every week. And for those of you tuning in and listening in, we'll see you back here next week on Let's Talk Real Estate.
Well, there you have it. You've been listening to Let's Talk Real Estate, your weekly BS with Barry Saywitz about the current state of the real commercial real estate market right here in Southern California. On Orange County's only community radio station, OC Talk Radio, streaming live from our studio here at the University of California Irvine's Beale Applied Innovation Center.